Welcome to the next installment of the Mojica audio program. Together, we'll delve into the life of Daniel Jacob Mojica, and we'll discover the answers to questions such as, who is Danny? And why did Danny do that? And finally, does Danny still do that? Our journey begins in 1947. Wait, that can't possibly be right. My apologies. It was 1974, a year that radiated new possibilities. The first ever presidential resignation occurred, and paleontologists unearthed the bones of Lucy, a mysterious creature that was halfway between ape and human. During this transformative year, Danny's mother became pregnant with her third baby. She wanted to pick a perfect name for the tiny life growing inside her.
When we were looking for a name for Danny, I liked the name Daniel. Daniel in the lion's den, that's what I told him. It's a biblical story. And I told him, you have a very strong name because the prophet Daniel, and he was thrown in the lion's den, and the lions didn't do anything to him.
On December 5th, 1974, Danny made his grand entrance into the world. His dad remembers his first impression of seeing his newborn son.
He had a full head of hair on him, and it was so much hair that the nurses put Vaseline to kind of push it down. And he had two little hairs sticking out. So when they brought him to me, it reminded me of alfalfa.
Danny's father loved playing with his children. He often enjoyed staging little performances where the Mojica family would let their imaginations run wild. For example, one day they found themselves transported to the flickering black and white world of The Ed Sullivan Show, with the Mojica kids as the star performers.
Ladies and gentlemen, tonight, live from New York, The Ed Sullivan Show.
We're back again, and we're going to do some more performing. Right straight from 3401 Tyler, El Paso, Texas. Right direct from our living room comes the one and the little, but the mighty, Danny Mojica. Okay, here you go.
Danny's mother loved to sing. Each night she would sing her children to sleep. Every child had their favorite song. For Danny, it was always, "You Are My Sunshine." Let's listen to his mom sing this song to her young children.
You are my sunshine, my sunshine. You make me happy, sky blue. You never know how much I love you. Please don't taste my sunshine.
As Danny grew, his parents realized they needed a more watchful eye on him than other children.
He's the only child that I know that had a silver tooth before he got his real teeth. He went skating. It was a birthday party at a skating rink.
He had to skate faster than everybody else. The consequences was he couldn't stop.
He lost his tooth. Things like that would happen to him.
In his mind, he could do anything. He didn't see that he had any limits. He'd gotten into trouble quite a few times.
Danny was the kind of boy who never quite knew where the edge was until he found himself tumbling over it. His parents urged him to be careful, but the thrill of doing what he wasn't supposed to was too intoxicating to resist. The neighborhood kids would watch him perform daredevil stunts. His two older siblings, Monica and Richard, recall an event where Danny launched himself from a swing to clear a line of bicycles.
I saw Danny swing higher and higher, his legs pumping towards the sky. This seems a little dangerous. because his butt got a little bit off the swing. All of us stopped and looked up in the air, jaws open. And for a moment, it was beautiful. There's a whoosh from the swing, his little body silhouetted against the sky. And then in that split second, we realized he was going to fall.
Didn't quite clear the bite. His arms started swelling immediately. We had to take him back to the house. We went to the orthopedic, and I believe that was the first time we met Dr. Barry King, which was not going to be the last time, because Danny broke several different bones growing up.
In 1989, Danny started his freshman year at Cathedral High School.
The first year, everything was all basketball, basketball, basketball. I was fortunate to be in the starting five of the freshman team. And in the second year, towards the end, I got introduced into other stuff. Probably the influence of Richard and Monica.
He played basketball, but then he realized, you know what, this really isn't my thing. This isn't the crowd that I feel most associated with. He got into theater arts. And while he was with the theater group, I think he found his people.
Monica and Richard were tight with the theater. There's no way I'm going to act. I don't want to be up front. So stage crew absolutely was an option. Be part of the people that I already was getting along with.
Danny cherished the time he spent with his high school friends, a close-knit group that included Alex, Chris, Ryan, Eric, Paul, and 3 guys named David. Though they worked behind the scenes on school plays, they were anything but shy when it came to expressing their passions. They filmed quirky videos that captured the absurdities of high school life and held lively discussions about books written by countercultural icons like Hunter S. Thompson. The boys also stumbled upon a band that would profoundly influence Danny's life, Phish. Phish is an eclectic jam band known for their improvisational live shows and their dedicated fan base, known as Phish Heads.
I had some of the best times in high school with that group. I always wanted to keep going. With anything I do, I just want to complete it.
Danny's father saw reflections of his younger self in his teenage son, the same youthful energy, full of potential to make a difference in the world. But he also saw shadows of his past mistakes, poor choices that could hold his son back. Before Danny entered adulthood, he wanted to have a heart-to-heart talk about how the consequences of all the decisions we make define our lives. While driving to see a Notre Dame game in a rental car that was part business trip and part impromptu family vacation, he found the father and son moment he'd been waiting for when it was just the two of them.
I had all these thoughts that I wanted to form for a long time. He was a senior in high school. In a few months, you're going to have to start looking at different colleges. He was trying to decide what he wanted to do because he wasn't sure. We talked about life. We talked a lot about making the right choices and what was going to happen in the very near future. Some of the life choices he made were probably not the best. And this is going to define your life. You can do whatever you want that's more fun right now, but think of the consequences of what's going to happen.
In 1993, Danny graduated from Cathedral High School and relocated to San Antonio. His love of music helped him forge more friendships. An important connection began at his job at Pavlov's veterinary clinic, where Danny met Beth, a fellow Phish head. Phish fans have a way of finding one another, often forming an instant connection over their shared love of the band. These chance encounters can spark conversations that evolve into lasting friendships. This connection occurred with Beth and Danny. Coincidentally, around the same time, Beth also discovered a fish head at school whom Danny knew from El Paso. This fish head is named David Bowman. Here is Beth explaining how she met David Bowman and the surprise that David Bowman knew Danny.
It was a weird meeting Danny because I went to UTSA, and one day there was a note on my car that said, "Hey, I saw you had a fish sticker. I'm a fish fan." The guy gave me his number. There wasn't a lot of fish heads in San Antonio. We met up and we exchanged some tapes of shows. I'd taken some time off work to go see fish. It was during one of those periods that I was gone, and I came back and Danny was there. Somehow fish came up and I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm trading tapes with this guy at UTSA." And he was like, "Oh, David Bowman." And I was like, "Oh my God, how do you know him?" He was like, "I know him from El Paso."
Beth's shared love of fish not only introduced her to David Bowman, one of the 3 Davids who was Danny's friend from Cathedral High School, but also grew her friendship with Danny. Unbeknownst to Danny at the time, Beth would assist in the birth of his children many years later. Beth and her future husband, Doug Sims, introduced Danny to more of the live music scene in San Antonio and Austin, where they found kindred spirits, fishheads, deadheads, and other music devotees. One day, Beth and Doug invited Danny to join them on a fish tour across the Pacific Northwest.
The first long trip we did, we left from San Antonio, that Danny was with us. We left from San Antonio, drove up through
We
Colorado.
went to El Paso and we were in the
It was very
RV.
true. It is a horrible rainstorm.
There's a horrible rainstorm. I was freaking out. It was 4 inches of water swooshing by us. Danny's like, "It's fine. This is just what El Paso does." And then we met all you guys.
Drove to Colorado,
Right.
stopped for a night, and then we drove all the way up to Montana. We camped out in the Bob Marshall Wilderness. After that week in Montana, we started catching the fish. And we saw them in Portland, Gorge at Washington State for a couple shows there, and then Shoreline, Mountain View in San Francisco area.
And then we didn't have any more tickets after that. We're south of San Francisco. We drove down 101. And at one point, Doug and I were like, "Okay, it's up to you guys. Like, y'all are driving." Danny was driving. And we're like, "When you hit 10, go to Texas." So we're sleeping. And then all of a sudden we hear,
Danny starts banging on
Danny's banging on the thing. He's like, "What do I do when the freeway ends?" We're like, "What? The freeway ends?" And so we're thinking the 101 ended.
Yeah.
We all jump out and we're in Santa Monica.
And so
Because-
he said it was habitual for him to get on I-10 West. You can only go so far on I-10 West.
Doug and Beth had entrusted Danny to drive them down the 101 to Interstate 10, then take Interstate 10 east to Texas. But when he reached I-10, he took a right instead of a left, thereby leading them west to the Pacific Ocean. Danny had driven the group to a dead end. Danny would make another close friend in San Antonio thanks to a spontaneous act of curiosity, a stranger leaving a handwritten note on Danny's friend's Volkswagen. That stranger would later become Danny's best man at his wedding. Here's how Danny's friend Evan recalls their origin story.
I met Danny because I left a note on a friend of his car. Cassie had a Volkswagen van, and I was doing my student teaching up there at UTSA, and I was like, "Hey, if you have a Volkswagen van, you must be cool." I got in touch with Cassie. Cassie was friends with Danny. When he was moving out of his apartment, a bunch of people were like, "Hey, well, we should all get a house together." I was like, "Dude, you would be cool to be a roommate." So Danny is a roommate. Pretty thoughtful, nice guy. Always used too much soap on dishes, but it's acceptable. I understand it. Russell, on the other hand, it's funny. No. I'm sorry. I got that backwards. Russell always used too much soap on the dishes. Danny barely used soap. He would use like one little thing. I also loved that he did the yard work. It would be the weekend and he would be like, "All right, I'm going to go do some yard work."
During the time Danny lived at West French, some of his most memorable roommates were the pets. The cats were Gray Boy, Jones, Gus, and Miss Pickles, the spicy sweetheart of the group. The dogs were Fred and Maggie, though Maggie held a special place in Danny's life as his dog. Maggie's journey to becoming Danny's furry companion began one ordinary day at Pavlov's veterinary clinic. Beth had casually said, "Your dog is here," leaving Danny puzzled. He hadn't been looking for a pet. But when he arrived at work, he saw Maggie, a gentle, frightened dog who had been abandoned. Her vulnerability struck a chord with him. Filled with compassion, Danny offered her kindness, a home, and the safe, loving life she deserved. West French had a jam room stocked with guitars, bass, keyboards, and a drum set. Evan recalls encouraging Danny to play the drums.
I had a keyboard. I played a little bit of everything, and I was like, hey man, you should play drums. And so he starts playing drums. The first couple months didn't sound fantastic. And he hit a point maybe 6 or 7 months into playing drums where he's matching what other people are doing and keeping the rhythm with them.
As a roommate, Evan gained firsthand insight into Danny's quirks and charm.
When I lived with Danny, we were in our 20s. We were single dudes living in a house, and every so often we would have big parties. Danny was one of the quietest people in the group. He's not getting on stage and doing jokes like Russell. After knowing Danny for a while, he's got something inside him where he's just a nice guy. It made other people react. When he was in a room, everything's cool. It felt chill. It felt happy.
One of these types of parties would become the setting for his first meeting with his future wife, Jen. One night in late October 2004, Jen worked in her studio, a sprawling warehouse she called both her art sanctuary and home. Perched by clattering train tracks, her loft was shared with her roommate, Gary. If you were to step inside, someone might show you a jeweled toilet seat, allegedly owned and perhaps used by Saddam Hussein, the former totalitarian leader of Iraq, whose government was overthrown by a United States-led coalition, and who now posthumously has a small cameo in an American love story. That night, after hours of creating art, Jen set down her tools and joined her friends for libations at her favorite watering hole, the Blue Star Brewery. Meanwhile, Danny and his friends were also hanging out at the Blue Star Brewery, sampling beers for their upcoming Halloween party. Danny describes his first encounter with Jen.
I'm there at Blue Star with a bunch of my very close friends, and we're testing out beers and laughing. I was already in a good mood. Things aligned. And she just came in.
I had to do something because I had that feeling that person was special. I've never had that feeling before, and so I needed to at least talk to her.
Was it the dust around her goggles? Was it the weathered look that she had after work?
I was doing a lot of sanding. I don't know if I had goggles on. I might have been covered in dust.
Or was it me wondering what's next in this fun part of my life?
Then it struck Danny with the weight of inevitability. He had to invite her to the Halloween party. If she said yes, she might marvel at his bold commitment to the Halloween spirit. Wearing a full-blown gorilla suit when it's still humid in San Antonio, resulting in being drenched in body sweat and risking critical heat exhaustion. Listen to Danny declare his lifelong Halloween dream.
I've always wanted to be a gorilla.
As Danny gazed at Jen from across the room, his mind juggling thoughts of gorillas, goggles, and the beer in his hand, he was completely captivated by her presence. Determined to strike up a conversation, he began plotting a way to approach her. But even with the liquid courage from his drink, he couldn't muster the nerve. Failure, in Danny's eyes, was not an option. Realizing the stakes were high and wanting to make his move count, he enlisted the help of his friend Dave Sims, Doug's brother, who already knew Jen. Here's Jen's account of Dave's attempt to convince her to come to their party.
He said, hey, we're gonna have this party. And then he pointed, he said, that guy over there wants you to come. And I looked, and I had no idea, because there were like 4 guys there, so I didn't know who that was. And they all put up their little fingers and kind of waved like fairies. I was like, okay, I'm gonna say.
She politely declined the invitation from the 4 men waving at her, leaving Danny a little disappointed. But the story doesn't end there. As fate would have it, Jen agreed to attend a friend of a friend's Halloween party on a different night, a party where Danny just so happened to be as well. If you haven't guessed by now, Danny went to a lot of parties. It was at this other gathering that Danny got another chance to meet Jen.
My friend Jen said, you should just come to this party. I had just broken up with my other boyfriend, and I was down in the dumps, and I just wanted to stay in that loft apartment with Gary, hanging out, watching movies. But Jen said you could stay really quick, and then I'll take you back home. And so that's what I did. I had no idea that Dave and his friends were going to be there. We walk in, and she left me to go talk to people. And that's when Danny came up and started talking to me.
At that party, Danny and Jen exchanged phone numbers. For the next 2 weeks, they talked on the phone nightly, usually after 9 p.m., because minutes were free after 9 p.m. back then. Each chat revealed something new about her life. Little bits of trivia that he studied as if it were going to be on a final exam.
I would call her and we would just chat. I didn't want to mess it up. And it was a gradual acceptance of each other's company.
That's funny. Early on, I was like, I don't know if I like this guy. I was still really upset about the other boyfriend. And my friend Jen said, I think that's really sweet. He's courting you, because he was just calling me. Guys don't do that anymore. And she said, you need to give him a chance.
After a year of dating, Danny moved in with Jen. Within a few months, he was sure he wanted to marry her. She knew too, having picked up on the not-so-subtle hints of his intentions.
Danny is not full of surprises. So he probably said something along the lines of, if we're going to get married, we need to start looking at rings. So what kind of ring would you want? We went to Sloan Hall together. We picked out the rings.
Danny proposed. With flowers in hand and candlelight setting the scene, he got down on one knee and said the words. She said yes without any hesitation. They celebrated their milestone with friends and family. Danny and Jen gave themselves a full year to plan their wedding, setting the date for November 11th, Veterans Day. However, there was one snag in their plan. During that year, Danny's sister, Monica, became pregnant with a due date that was close to the wedding. It quickly became clear to everyone Monica wouldn't be able to attend. November 11th, 2006, the wedding day, finally arrived. Vows were exchanged. Live music filled the air. 2 families became one. Old friends reconnected, and the dance floor came alive. As the night wore on, the celebration spilled over to San Antonio's Riverwalk, where the festivities carried on under the glow of the city lights. Jen explains how their wedding celebration was intended for everyone to come together.
We really wanted friends and family to be together and enjoy themselves. That was really important for Danny and I. We didn't want it just to be about us. We wanted it to be about the family and friends.
Danny and Jen celebrated their honeymoon in Playa del Carmen, Mexico, but they chose to cut the trip short. They were eager to visit their new nephew, Luke, so they told Old Mexico, adios, setting their destination to New Mexico. Monica felt moved by this gesture.
It really, really made my day. They came back from their honeymoon to meet Luke. All they did was want to hold him. And I was like, awesome. I'm going to go take a nap. It was so cool that they had this big moment in their life And then they met Luke.
Friends and family knew Danny would make a great father by the way he interacted with their children. Beth explains she was inspired to name her son after Danny.
One of the reasons we named Daniel Daniel was after Danny. Daniel's initials are DJ as well, so that was intentional. We had asked Danny to be Daniel's godfather. I do remember Danny always being very sweet and gentle and getting down on Daniel's level, as Danny does, immersed with whatever thing Daniel was into at the time.
One day, Jen discovered she was pregnant, and she and Danny began to wonder, how would they adapt to being called mom and dad by a tiny new person? For this life-changing event, they asked Beth to be their doula.
I've seen the close friends of mine starting to grow their family, and they were just happy. It was the next gradual step of life with her. We planned for Milo, the room, and the clothes he was going to wear. We planned for everything. Thankfully, I had one of my best friends ever there with me. Beth was there, and she was guiding Jen how to prepare for what's coming up.
I was very lucky because they asked me to be their doula.
Milo Xavier Mojica was born on June 3, 2009. Danny and Jen were excited to introduce him to family and friends, but something happened that forced them to pause their excitement.
Beth noticed something that was different and wrong.
Things about that birth didn't make sense. Jen was supposed to get another shot of antibiotics.
But when you are getting ready to have a kid, they test you for a certain bacterium, and she did have that. So in order not to pass this on to a kid, they need to start IV fluids after a certain amount of contractions, which they forgot to do. His immune system wasn't ready to take it. I was so elated that I had a son, and then within a few hours, he was going to be taken away. It was just unfathomable.
Danny's parents recount this challenging time.
I remember it like it was yesterday. He's very sick. He's in ICU. He's not breathing well. I thought, oh my gosh, what do we do?
What helped me a lot was this one couple brought their twin girls to thank the nurses that they were okay and that they were very active and normal. That helped me a lot, knowing that these people know what they're doing.
After 2 weeks in the neonatal ICU, Milo grew strong and healthy enough to finally join his mom and dad at home. Here's what Jen recalls about the moment he was finally released from the hospital.
When we took him home, he slept like for 2 days. He was probably exhausted. You're holding this little person, and then you're going to be responsible for them and everything that you do.
Danny and Jen were happy as a family of 3, but they couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Another child to make them a family of 4, and maybe a few more dogs to complete the picture. Beth was also the doula for their second baby.
We both wanted to have another kid. We heard 4 years is a good time between kids. So again, everything's planned.
Maisie Ray Mojica was born on April 23, 2013. Her arrival was so fast that it threw everyone's plans into disarray.
It was fast. And I remember the nurse was telling Jen not to push, and Danny was looking at me because Jen was like, I can't help but pushing.
Macy came out really quick. The nurse didn't want to catch Macy because it was right at her shift change, and she didn't want to fill out the paperwork. It was Beth who scooped her up.
It was a whirlwind. She just came so quick. But then when she decided to come, she kind of fits her personality. She plays through.
Here's Danny's parents' account of their frantic journey to San Antonio, racing against the clock to be there in time for Maisie's arrival.
Macy came very quickly. Jen started going to labor at night, right? And Dad says, we're getting the tickets right now. We were able to be there, but on our way up the escalator, Macy was born. She just popped out.
We got the picture of her as we're going up the escalators. We were showing everybody. We showed the security people, we showed the flight attendants, we showed the captain of the airplane. Everybody was enjoying our excitement. The flight attendants did make an announcement.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? 2 of our wonderful passengers have just become proud grandparents of a beautiful baby girl. I'm sure many of you have already seen the photo. On behalf of the crew, a big congratulations to the happy grandparents. The flight crew are now in the mood to celebrate life, so drinks are on us. Oh, I forgot to mention the captain said to put your seatbelt on because we are currently taking off, like right now. Thanks, y'all.
Everybody was just applauding.
just
It was one of those
happy
moments
moments.
where you could not contain your happiness. It just radiated out of you. And
With Macy, seeing her in the display window with a little bow on her head. I was like, oh, this is my little girl. I remember texting everybody, say hello to Macy Ray Mojica.
Danny's a good dad. He tries to make everybody happy. He'll wake up really early. He will get his cup of coffee. Sometimes he sits outside if it's nice and there's no mosquitoes. Sometimes he'll just sit inside. And he has these visions, these Mary Poppins moments of how the day is going to play out. It doesn't always go as planned, but he really does want to try to take them off their cell phones for the day so that they're more engaged or just connecting.
Fast forward to 2024, and Danny is hitting the 50-year milestone, half a century of life. Ask him how he feels about it, and he'll shrug it off, insisting it's just another birthday, no different from 47. What truly matters to him aren't the numbers, but the moments he shares with his family.
I'm so lucky. To me, this is living well. It goes by so quick. Everything goes by so quick.
They have their own lives and they have their own interests. For Milo, it's like he's talking about driving and colleges. And Macy is finding her way in middle school, trying to find her identity.
These days, Danny no longer dresses as a party-loving gorilla, but as a friendly lion. He volunteers at San Antonio Lions Club, an organization that gives back to the community.
Being associated with good people make you even a better person. I've been part of this group for about 5 years. They said, would you mind dressing up as a lion? I said, of course not. Apparently I was put up for an award. I got this nice plaque. It was funny. He does everything that no one wants to do kind of award. I'll clean the dishes. I'll mop. I'll wear the lion mask. They gave me that award because I do what needs to get done. Now, Daniel and the Lions, there's a coincidence with that. I don't know why, but it is. There's so many coincidences in life.
Now it's time to hear what Milo and Macy have to say about Danny being their dad.
Hey, Dad. I'm very happy that it's your birthday, and I'm very happy that I get to celebrate it with you turning 50, as it's a pretty big number. I've always loved hanging around with you. I can't imagine my life without you. Thank you for everything you've done.
My dad is amazing, and I'm so lucky to have him because, like, most dads aren't as amazing as mine. He makes us smile, he makes us laugh, and we are forever best friends. And I love my dad.
And finally, for the members of the family who walk on 4 legs, who are covered in fur, and who hopefully pee outside, have this to say about Danny. Translation.
You're a good dog, Dad. More treats, please.
Well, it was many years ago now, but I really can't be sure. That's when it all began then. I heard the knock upon my door.